Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and updates on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hello there.
And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Greetings, my friend.
Greetings. And this week we've got some pretty surprising news about the Xbox and Activision Blizzard acquisition, which I definitely want to get Ryan's thoughts on. But let's begin today with a new next-gen game that's out now and by all accounts is pretty great. It's Star Wars Jedi Survivor. IGN's review is out. Our reviewer, Dan Stapleton, gave it a 9 out of 10. He thought it was amazing, and from what I've played so far, I concur. I've played many hours of it, and I think my main takeaway is that I think I've barely scratched the surface because this game is enormous. It's an incredibly huge game. Lots of planets, and in the play areas, the maps on each planet are enormous unto themselves, and it's just filled with little nooks and crannies for you to explore. So I've just been running around on the sort of the second area, doing everything that I can before I progress the story forward. But I love it. It's great. I love the original game, and this seems to be bigger and better in every way. Max, what are your thoughts on Star Wars Jedi Survivor so far?
Everything you just said. It's so good. It's such a good time. Something that kind of hit me, I think when we saw early trailers for this, where we see Cal with a blaster, it feels like the inverse of Dark Forces to Jedi Knight. Like this is, in that one you start out with just blasters and then you got a lightsaber, and in this one you start out with just a lightsaber and you get blasters. That's kind of just anecdotal, but it does feel like that level of just, it's such a huge leap. This is what I wanted from like new Star Wars games. When we heard that EA was going to be making them, I was like, I hope it's like this. And it took a minute, but here we are.
Yeah, the combat feels so good. I'm playing on PS5. I've encountered a couple technical issues, but there's a day one patch coming that's supposed to resolve a lot of those. And Ryan, I think I'm of the understanding that you've been waiting for that day one patch because you were able to preview the game, but in order to start the final version, you've been waiting for that patch, correct?
Yeah, I also selfishly wanted to play on Xbox on my couch in front of my big TV rather than my PC monitor that I spend all day in front of. So I was already blessed to play this game for 5 or so hours at Respawn a few months ago. And, Damon, I've been at this long enough, over 20 years now, where I've developed a pretty good spidey sense for like when a game, like I see a game early when it's going to be like really, really good. Now, it's not 100% accurate. Sometimes I get it wrong, but this one, the spidey sense went off real quick after I'd been playing at Respawn for a bit. I was like, I think this is going to be really, really good. At the time, the build I was playing again months ago, my only thought was, unless they don't pull together the technical side of this, and then literally the next week, before our IGN first coverage even started, they announced the delay of 6 weeks. So I was like, okay, that still doesn't guarantee a totally polished, smooth experience. And it sounds like, there's a couple little rough edges here and there, which the first one suffered from as well. But yeah, it just gameplay-wise, it's the same thing as what both of you were saying. You really get the sense that it is a big Star Wars adventure, which, to Max's point, is exactly what we've been wanting from a AAA Star Wars video game that we just unfortunately haven't really gotten until Respawn got around to giving it to us here. First, a bit with Jedi Fallen Order, but they just dig in more with this game, and this is the kickoff, man. This is the kickoff of this stretch of insane games, like we were talking about on last week's show. And yeah, it's I got to put in as much Jedi Survivor time as I can with Zelda and Diablo right behind it.
It's a good problem to have. I think it's really surpassed my expectations, and I had pretty high hopes for it. But it's just they really took all the little. Everything that they've done with the first one and just, expanded on it so much. So it feels like a next-gen game. Like in terms of just scale and scope and just how it moves from one thing to the next. I feel like that's kind of what I signed up for, and it's kind of been in short supply.
Yeah. No, that opening area, the first few hours on Coruscant is amazing. How far you can see into the distance with all the ships flying around. It looks so cool. It's great to have, in terms of this show, it's great to have a real next-gen game out that's just fantastic. And it reminds me that this is not the only Star Wars game that we have coming. There are actually quite a few other next-gen Star Wars games on the horizon. And I say next-gen just because I don't think any of these are coming anytime soon. So one can assume that they're going to be next-gen only games. So let's just sort of remind ourselves what we have coming. And the first one that I want to mention, I hope I just hope it actually does come to fruition. It's the remake of Knights of the Old Republic, which was announced at a PlayStation showcase back in September 2021. Then a year later, apparently development was paused indefinitely, and then development was reportedly moved from Aspyr to Saber. So I don't know. The original Knights of the Old Republic is an incredible game, but the bar for remakes has been risen pretty high recently with the likes of Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space remake. I don't know. Ryan, do you have any sort of spidey sense about what's going on with the KOTOR remake?
I wish I did. I mean, the vibes are not good right now after all those reports of the issues with development. And I mean, being quite frank, just given the Aspyr's track record overall, they've been a port house for most of their lives. Like, they've never, to the best of my knowledge, taken on an original project anywhere close to the scale and scope of a full-on next-gen KOTOR remake, not remaster, remake. Like, these guys had been making file save as ports of, like, GameCube, Xbox, PS2 era games, and just like, well, it runs now and you can play it on your new thing, but we didn't really add anything else to it. And there's a place for that, but so there was already the yellow flag, like the caution flag was out for, like, okay, you guys are taking this big of a bite here. I mean, I wish you the best, because I'm with you, Damon. For me, ironically made by the same team, Mass Effect 1 is probably real close, but gun to my head, I would say Knights of the Old Republic is my favorite role-playing game ever, period. Wow. I just have such great memories of it. It was so much fun to play Dark Side, and I would love to see. I mean, I think the combat's going to probably have to go pretty real-time-ish, or at least look and feel pretty real-time, even if you can pause it here and there. Whereas the original was straight up, you were queuing up attacks, and it was pretty turn-based in that sort of, as things were in that era. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with it, if we're ever going to see it, or if we are, if it's going to be anytime remotely soon. But I would love it. If it's going to happen, it's got to be awesome. Like, they can't remake this and have it be like half-assed. That's going to be the worst-case scenario.
Yeah, I agree that things don't look particularly encouraging now. However, Dead Island 2 just proved that a game can emerge from a near decade of development hell and turn out reasonably well and sell 1 million copies right out the gate. So. And
devil's advocate, I mean, Blue Point is also a port house, and they did Demon's Souls, which was...
But their track record is way better than a spot. Again, like, they've done much more involved technical stuff to those games than what Aspyr had traditionally done.
I mean, we've seen a lot of remakes that are, they do their homework. They fill the checklist. They take a game that we remember having a good time with, and they make it look better and play on modern stuff. And I feel like the demand for remakes is a lot higher, especially since Dead Space.
And I would also argue that, respectfully, Damon, like a 7 would not be good enough for a KOTOR remake. Like,
of course.
Not that Dead Island 2 had any sort of other thing to really live up to. It just changed hands and had quite a story through development. But yeah, KOTOR being a thing that a lot of us know and love a lot, it can't come out and just be a 7. It's got to be got to be a 9 or a 10.
Yeah, agreed. One of the more interesting Star Wars projects to me is Star Wars Eclipse from Quantic Dream. This was announced in December 2021 at the Game Awards, I believe, and it's been silent ever since then. So not too many updates in over a year now. But we know it's an action-adventure, multiple-character branching narrative game set in the High Republic era. And I think gameplay-wise, we should expect it to be pretty typical Quantic Dream stuff. This one's interesting to me. I don't play very many Quantic Dream games. I don't think they're usually for me. However, I love Star Wars, and I'll play a branching narrative game that they make set in the Star Wars universe. Max, is this something that sort of like perks your interest?
I mean, I'll give it benefit of the doubt, but I feel like I'm kind of on the same page as you, Damon. Like, Quantic Dream, I've dabbled with them, but it's not really like it's too heavy on the narrative, not enough on the gameplay. And with Star Wars, it's like we've got shows and movies to kind of cover those bases. Meanwhile, it's also Quantic Dream has had some kind of bad buzz, I feel like, since this was announced.
It's true.
And I just get the feeling that this game is so far away, if it ever sees the light of day. It just, I mean, that trailer was just like very heavy, CGI sizzle. That was, I don't know what this game is gonna look like when it does actually surface. but
I agree.
I'm skeptical.
I will defend Quantic not from a like workplace culture standpoint. I don't know the full story of what's going on there, but from a game perspective, they do make my kind of games. I've always loved adventure games, and they've basically spent the last 15 plus years, going all the way back to like Indigo Prophecy, making high budget adventure games, which like Telltale stuff is great, but it's a different tier of production value and production budget. And Heavy Rain's one of my personal favorite PS3 games. I just love that story. Beyond Two Souls was definitely a miss. I liked Detroit Become Human a lot, not as much as Heavy Rain, but like I've always appreciated that there is a developer out there that has dedicated themselves to making like really high budget, high production value adventure games. And so presumably this would also fall into the high budget, high production value category, given that it's going to be a Star Wars game. So yeah, it's now granted, Quantic has other than going all the way back to Indigo Prophecy, they've spent the last 12 plus years developing exclusively for Sony platforms. That, as far as we know, won't be the case. This will be a multi-platform game. So, it's not to say that they're not capable of making a beautiful, great multi-platform game, but hopefully they're able to dial in their tech as well as for a multi-platform game as they did with only having to worry about their PlayStation dev kits in their office.
To your point about adventure games, it is really weird we haven't gotten more Star Wars adventure games, especially since LucasArts is famous for point-and-click games. Like, we've gotten, a couple Indiana Jones games in that, that space, but just never got a...
Even back then, in those glory days.
I think when you frame it that way, I'm a little bit more intrigued, but I would still, rather have just like a kind of, point-and-click Monkey Island approach than the David Cage
It would be cheaper, but that's the fun, right? We're going to get a like super high-end, big-budget game if, to your point, Max, if it ever
Give it
comes
to Ron
out,
Gilbert. Get Ron Gilbert on the phone.
Hey, I would love that.
He just wrapped up another Monkey Island, so I don't know, maybe he needs a new project. Another big Star Wars project that we don't know much about is Ubisoft and Massive's Star Wars game. We know it's going to be an open world, single player game, story driven, set in the Star Wars galaxy. But that's all we know. And this was announced back in January of 2021, so it's been a couple years, no news on that. But if we just think, typical Ubisoft stuff, we know how that tends to go, and that's my kind of game. So if you take that sort of Ubisoft formula game and drop it into the Star Wars universe, I'm probably going to be on board with that. I don't know, Max, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we heard that EA had an exclusive deal for 10 years worth of Star Wars games, that was kind of my biggest concern. Is like they kind of have a lot of linear shooters, multiplayer stuff with microtransactions. The Ubisoft formula seems so much better suited to Star Wars because they, just give me Far Cry on Tatooine. Like, I realize that is extremely reductive, but like in the same way that I was like, hey, what if, for Battlefront, it was just Battlefield with Star Wars? And they sort of did that. But like, again, it's like, just if you've got a formula that works, don't overthink it. Just throw some blasters in there, add some Wookiees. It's just make it a Star Wars thing. And I realize that's not demanding much. But like, again, Ubisoft seems to have kind of cracked that code. There has been kind of a slow in releases recently. They've kind of gone back to the drawing board. So I wonder if they're feeling pressure to, iterate a little bit and actually try some new things. But, when and if it does finally happen, an open world, next gen Star Wars game in the Snowdrop engine has things you climb to unlock areas of the map.
Yep.
Sure, sign me up.
Yep, I love all that. And then Ryan, Massive, the developer handling this, they did The Division and The Division 2. I think back in the day they did Far Cry 3. They're also handling Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora. So they've got a lot on their plate, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that to me, like, so first of all, to the best of my knowledge, we have never gotten an open world single player Star Wars game. I don't think that's ever been made. So that alone has me super intrigued. I'm not as into the classic Ubisoft open world game. Not that I think they're bad by any means. They're just, to me, they tend to be a jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing, which isn't quite up my alley. Like, or at least I'll say I tend to play those games for a handful of hours and then roll off of them. Like, I don't end up usually investing a ton into them. So it remains to be seen what exactly they do with with this Star Wars game. But to your point, Damon, like I think their Avatar game, pardon me, that they're in the middle of right now, that when that comes out and we see what that is, that should give us at least a good idea of kind of the quality bar and maybe even some gameplay hints here or there of what we can reasonably expect from their Star Wars game.
Agreed. And then, of course, Star Wars Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order come from Respawn, and Respawn has at least a couple other Star Wars projects that they're working on. They have a first-person shooter from, I think, Peter Hirschman, Ryan, is that right? He's
yes.
Is he the director on that game, the lead?
Yeah, one of the original creators of Medal of Honor, on the original Medal of Honor team. He did direct Respawn's only not awesome game, which was the Medal of Honor VR game that they did for Oculus a couple years ago. But yeah, like, I don't know what they're going to do with it, if they would go down the Republic Commando road in any sort of either direct or sort of spiritual successor kind of way. But Respawn doing a first-person shooter in the Star Wars universe that's like an instant, you have my attention kind of moment.
Yeah, even if it's just Titanfall 3 with a Star Wars skin, I think that would be okay too.
Bring it on.
Kyle Katarn with wall running. Just do it. That's all we need. Keep it simple.
He basically already does wall running. And then the other game from Respawn is, it's actually from Bit Reactor, which is a new strategy game studio that's working very closely with Respawn. So they're going to be building a Star Wars strategy game with former XCOM developers. We don't know if it's real time or turn based, but if it's XCOM, we probably are going to guess it as
probably
tactical, squad based, and that sounds very, very cool to me. I like those types of games. Again, there's all sorts of games that I like. If you just skin them with Star Wars, I'm probably going to be on board. Then one of the most interesting and exciting Star Wars projects is Skydance Studios' Star Wars game. It's Skydance New Media, which is a new game developer founded in 2019, led by Amy Hennig. So they haven't shipped a game yet, but they have this Star Wars game as well as their Marvel game, which I think is a Black Panther sort of project. So this Star Wars game is supposed to be a narrative-driven action-adventure game featuring an original story. Ryan, is that enough to get you excited?
Definitely, because I'm old enough to remember Ragtag. Which was Amy Hennig's canceled, Uncharted-ish game that she was doing in the Star Wars universe at EA over here just down the road at what was blank Visceral, right? Thank you.
Visceral, right?
Whew, my brain still works. Anyway, so who's to say if any of that either, like, I'm not saying story but even like any little gameplay ideas that she may have had that could find their way into this. I mean, Amy Hennig Star Wars single player game. That's a winning combination right there. So that's going to instantly go to the top of my list once we find out more about it.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that because all we got for Ragtag was that like 2 or 3 second clip of somebody walking out a door, and that was it.
And it was so good.
Heartbreaking. I just wish we'd even seen more of it. But one thing I'm skeptical about is like I feel like if you do the fairly reined in, more linear Uncharted formula, like classic Uncharted with Star Wars, sounds cool. I'm definitely interested. But the Jedi games do it so well. Like they kind of take that and then some. Like it's got the climbing, it's got the puzzle solving, it's got the combat. I'm sort of like, what do you do to shake it up? How do you make that interesting rather than make it feel like something that kind of is more rudimentary?
Sure. And then the final game I wanted to mention, maybe not necessarily next gen, but Star Wars Hunters from Zynga, which is a battle royale Star Wars game. It's currently coming to mobile and Nintendo Switch, but certainly a next gen version could be possible if it were successful. The only hesitation I would have is that I think this game has been delayed more than once, and I don't sense a lot of hype out there around this game. I don't know, Ryan, am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I mean, this was when we were just double checking our research for the show, like, did we get all the Star Wars next gen games in development? And then we saw this one on the list, like, oh, yeah. So which is not a great sign. That it was sort of an afterthought in this discussion. But hey, wish them well. Let's more good Star Wars games is a good thing.
It's also it's Zynga, which I feel like doesn't have the best reputation, especially for anything more complicated than puzzle games.
Right.
That said, I love the idea of this because it kind of feels like Star Wars Demolition, but with characters as opposed to vehicles, and it's very silly. Like one of the fighters you can choose is just two Jawas like sitting on each other's shoulders, like trying to sneak into an R-rated movie, which is a level of like everything in Star Wars has to kind of meet this like story group style guide, and it all has to be canon. It would be nice to get a little bit of kind of goofy stuff on the side here and there. We had, I feel like before the Disney thing, or maybe just shortly after, we had, Tiny Death Star. And it's like, if we got a few more little kind of tongue-in-cheek things kind of in between the bigger stuff, that would be cool. And I mean, again, it's weird that, to Ryan's point, this game has been announced. We've seen gameplay, or at least footage of it. It's sort of a known quantity, and people don't seem to care, so.
Yeah,
good luck.
We'll see how that one shakes out. But I think there are quite a few exciting Star Wars projects on the horizon. They're probably all quite a ways away, I think. None of these have release dates, and a lot of them we haven't heard any updates on in years, maybe. But I am excited to play many of these. What's something that might be missing, though? None of these are like vehicular combat games. There's no like Rogue Squadron, nothing like that.
X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Hello.
X-Wing versus TIE Fighter.
I mean, we got Squadrons.
That's
that was
true.
One of the last
that was a good. We owe EA a tip of the cap on that one.
And no one talks about that. It kind of came and went. It's got VR support, but I don't know.
Okay, moving on. Our other topic this week, we record this on Wednesdays, and we just got the news today. Very surprising news, to me at least, that the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK has blocked Xbox's Activision Blizzard deal. And this came after, the news we were getting leading up to this decision. Everything seemed to indicate that they were leaning to the other direction into allowing it to pass. So, and what's even perhaps more surprising is that the block didn't have anything to do with Call of Duty. It was about the implications for cloud gaming. Ryan, what's your take on all this?
Well, first of all, yeah, it's just odd because this whole time Sony's been raising a stink about, Call of Duty, they can't have it, competition, blah, 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 and Microsoft said, okay, well, we're offering you a 10-year deal to continue to support the game as it's been supported on your platform, and we're making that same 10-year offer to Nintendo, to multiple cloud streaming services, and everybody accepted the deal except for Sony, who of course, kind of couldn't, or else their position was kind of null and void at that point. And so for it to just come out now and the CMA says, well, actually, it's going to be a problem with cloud streaming. We talked pretty in depth. We actually did most of the episode we spent, if you want to talk or hear more about this, on Podcast Unlocked this week. But the thing that comes to mind for me, Damon, is why is Microsoft being penalized for investing in a cloud streaming platform that works, that people actually want to use? Because, Sony has not really been able to get there to the degree.
They've only owned Gaikai for 13 years.
So, you've, as part of your Game Pass Ultimate subscription, you've got the xCloud stuff. You can stream your games. It works. So why it's like, and there's nobody else. Basically, Stadia failed, and Microsoft made a thing that works, and they're now being held to punishment for it, basically. And so that part of it doesn't really make, like, I understand the need for competition and how an absence of competition can be a bad thing for consumers, which is what that's who the CMA is supposed to be looking out for. But I don't see the logic in their blocking of this for this reason.
No, Max, you think? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Was Sony, like, if Sony hadn't been buying if Microsoft hadn't been buying Activision, what would that have changed about their approach to cloud? Because, like, as far as I can tell, xCloud and all that's been happening under Microsoft. Yeah, like, what does Activision have on their side that has anything to do with that?
Well, the CMA was like, well, you guys might just lock Call of Duty, and they mentioned Overwatch and World of Warcraft to their own, to the xCloud platform, when, again, that's just like Microsoft never made any, there's never been any words or actions to that effect from Microsoft. So it is a really strange, so Microsoft's appealing. I confess I don't know anything about the appellate process in the UK and whether this is like they have a realistic chance of getting things to go their way, or whether this is effectively done and over with. I mean, I'm certainly pretty pessimistic on it right now because if the CMA isn't going to give the go-ahead, it certainly doesn't bode well for the legal fight that Microsoft has looming against the FTC here in the United States. If the CMA had given the green light, that would have put Microsoft in a much better position with this FTC case. But now it's like it's quite the uphill battle now. So I don't know. I guess we're going to be stuck talking about this for weeks and months more, which is
thought we were going to be free.
Yeah, which is for us on Podcast Unlocked is maybe a fate worse than death because I'm really tired of talking about this. I just want it to go or not go. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean it's a monkey wrench that came out of left field. Though I guess since it's British, it would probably be a spanner. But of all the things they could have stopped this down for, this is not what I expected. And I mean I think there are valid reasons to be like, this seems awfully monopolistic. But the cloud gaming thing is just baffling, utterly weird.
Yeah. Well, I guess we will continue following this story even more into the weeks and months to come. It feels like we've been talking about this forever on this show and on other IGN shows, but the saga continues. I have the results of last episode's poll. We were talking about all these big, amazing games that are coming out this summer, kicked off with Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And we asked you, what is going to be your must-play game of the summer 2023? Perhaps, unsurprisingly, it is The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. Everyone's excited for that. We've got a big blowout of coverage on IGN 2 days ago when this is airing it was on Wednesday. A couple of our IGN editors got to play the game for hours and came away, with lots of exciting things to share. So lots of people are excited for Tears of the Kingdom. 48% said that's it's 46% said that's their most anticipated game of the summer. That was followed by then Diablo 4, then Final Fantasy 16, then Redfall, and then Street Fighter 6. So in any case.
Redfall beats Street Fighter?
Redfall beats Street Fighter by 1%, by a full percent.
How about
Good sign. Pikmin 4, way at the dead last. Only 1.5% of respondents picked
Or Miyamoto.
Aw.
New poll for you to vote on for next episode. What upcoming Star Wars game are you most excited for? Is it Star Wars Eclipse, the first-person shooter from Respawn, Amy Hennig's Star Wars game? Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you next episode. That's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Max and Ryan. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our LA and San Francisco studios to make this episode possible. My name is Damon. We'll be back next week with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.